Please welcome Nick and the talk on laundry.
Ivy, thank you very much indeed. Good evening. As Livy said, I used my lockdown productively. I wrote a book, and I have brought along a number of copies here. And it's a history of London's water supply. It doesn't say that on the cover, because if you put a history of water supply on the cover of a book, I can guarantee nobody would buy it. But actually, the history of London's water supply turns out to be really, really interesting. One of the reasons for buying and reading this book is that it tells you how we got into the mess that Louise was talking about earlier. You may not know this. I didn't until I started researching the subject, but I would argue the world's first modern business corporation, profit-making, dividend-distributing, was a London water company. The London water industry has a lot to answer for. I am selling copies of this book at the end of this talk. It'll cost you £15. It comes with my signature. I take cash or card. But I'm not going to talk about that anymore. I'm going to talk about one of the things in the book, which is a short history of laundry. That is Queen Elizabeth I, and I think we can all agree that Elizabeth I was a remarkable woman, remarkable in many ways, not least for her attitude to personal hygiene, because Elizabeth I used to take a bath once a month, whether she needed or no. And in Elizabethan times, that was a very brave thing to do, because the medical authorities at the time were absolutely clear that baths were dangerous. Use no baths or stoves, nor sweat too much, for all openeth the pores of a man's body, and maketh the venomous air to enter, and for to infect the blood. So, nobody in Elizabethan times took baths, so they must have stunk, mustn't they? Well, actually, no, they didn't. Why not? Well, because they washed their clothes. No, not those. You'd have to be mad to try and wash one of those. They washed their linen underclothes. Linen worn immediately close to the body, soaked up sweat and odours, and made everybody pleasant to be around. But of course, if everybody was wearing sweaty underclothes which needed washing from time to time, that produced a need for an awful lot of laundry. And so doing the laundry became absolutely vital for keeping everybody reasonably nice to be around. This was a man called John Taylor. He was an Elizabethan poet who doubled up as a London waterman. He was probably a better rower of boats than he was rhymer, but he wrote a poem in which at one point he said, "Remember that your laundress Pain is great, whose labours only keep you sweet and neat. Buy her thy linens sweet and cleanly dressed, else thou wouldst stink above ground like a beast." So, laundry was vitally important in Elizabethan England. It was also incredibly disruptive and unbelievably hard work, and all the hard work was all done by women. This is Samuel Pepys, not a woman, and almost certainly somebody who never did a day's washing in his life. But one entry in his diary, Monday, 26th of October, 1663, waked about 1 o'clock in the morning. My wife, being waked, rung her bell, and the maids rose and went to washing. We to sleep again till 7 o'clock, and then up, and I abroad. And a later entry explains why he went abroad, in other words, out all day. After done several businesses at the Change, I home, and being washing day, dined upon cold meat. There was no hot food on washing day. Why did the maids have to get up so early? Well, they had to revive the kitchen fire, because you couldn't do the laundry in early modern England without hot water, because early modern soap would not lather in cold water. And you needed a lot of water, which meant that every inch of your stove or grate or hearth or whatever it was occupied with vessels which were being used to heat water. There was absolutely no room and indeed no time to do any cooking. One reason why Monday was a very popular day for doing the laundry, because there might be some meat left over, cold meat left over from the Sunday joint. I mentioned early modern soap. What was early modern soap? Well, a lot of it was made from wood ash, or if it came from the kitchen fire, pot ash. And what you did was you took wood ash and you mixed it with tallow. Now that is a jar of modern tallow, probably from Waitrose. I expect it's extremely expensive and very nice stuff. Early modern tallow was notoriously smelly and unpleasant because it was made by rendering down, boiling down animal carcasses. The process stank, the end result stank. It was used for making cheap candles, which stank, and it was used for mixing with wood ash to make what was known as black soap, which also stank. One foreign visitor to London remarked that when you are in a place where the linen can be rinsed in any large water, the stink of the black soap is almost all cleared away. And I like that almost. You could get expensive soap. It came from the Mediterranean. It was made with the ashes of Mediterranean salt marsh plants. It was called castle soap because a lot of it came from Castile in Spain. Or you could go to the other extreme and get something very cheap. That is a chamber pot. You could empty your chamber pot in the morning out of your window, shouting "Gardy Lou" into the street to warn people passing by that something unpleasant was about to land on their heads. Or you could do what this chap is doing. You could thriftily store your urine, because stale urine turns to ammonia, and ammonia is a very effective bleach, and so you could use it to wash your clothes. They stank, of course, but because laundry was such an important and significant event in the life of the household, there were a number of labour-saving devices available to help. There were tongs, wooden tongs, to take the clothes in and out of the soapy water. There was also the thing on the left, which is called a dolly, and the thing on the right, which is called a posser, or possibly vice versa, I can never remember. And dollies and possers were there to agitate the clothes in the water so as to break up the dirt, get the dirt loose, and so on. And using them was extremely hard work. It did terrible things to your back, and women would do this on washing day for hours on end. Apparently it helped if you were wearing a corset, because the corset gave support to your lower back, but without the corset you risked crippling yourselves. As I say, doing the washing was almost exclusively women's work. For some reason this picture has got slightly cut off at the edge, but if you look on the right you can see a man doing the laundry. A man doing the laundry was an object of pity, because if he was got his hands in the sink, something had gone terribly wrong in his life. And this chap looks to me as if his wife lying on the bed there is very ill, possibly dying, and so extreme is his situation that he's having to wash the family smalls himself. Most washer women were indeed women. They were a very popular subject for artists. There are lots and lots of sort of Dutch genre paintings and so on of washer women. There was a sort of sub-genre which portrayed young washer women beside a stream doing the laundry, and a young man in a smart soldier's uniform, a sort of officer's uniform, was also in the picture. And that point is rather ruined in this case, because the young man, trust me, in the original of this picture, over to the side, there is a young man wearing an officer's uniform, and these giggling girls have seen him and are obviously about to flirt with him. There is another picture. They're a little less giggly, but the same general idea. Two attractive young women doing the washing in a river, and a soldier standing there next to him. The artists who portrayed all these washerwomen, or actually, as they would have said, laundry maids, were, you'll be surprised to know, all men. And they obviously found something really quite titillating in the idea of young women with their sleeves rolled up and showing their legs and so on. The reality was rather different. Because it was such hard work and heavy labour, the people who actually did the washing were rarely slim little girls. They were mature women with a bit of beef about them, and they were women who, in some cases, were widows or were people who'd been left destitute but had turned to doing the laundry, being a washerwoman, as a way to earn a living and give themselves some economic agency. We know a bit about how hard they worked from one of them in the 18th century called Mary Collier, who was astonishingly a poet. She wrote a poem about being a washerwoman in Hampshire. She used to go around the big houses locally doing the washing. And in the poem she talks about turning up very early in the morning, freezing cold, and having to stand outside the door of the house where she's gone to do the washing because the maid has overslept and there's no one to let her in, and then the woman of the house comes down and there's a real pain. But she also explains what it was like to have your hands up to the elbows in water all day long. Now we drive on, she wrote, and resolved our strength to try, and what we can we do most willingly, until with heat and work 'tis often known not only sweat but blood runs trickling down our wrists and fingers. And I don't think that was an exaggeration. I think if you did spend your entire day, every day, with your hands in water, you would undoubtedly end up with hands so chapped that they would bleed. It became a byword, laundry, being a washerwoman, for also candidly liking a drink, not surprisingly. Here is a poem, 19th century poem, which really needs to be read in a Cockney accent, which I will not attempt. Toiling, boiling all the day, rubbing, slushing, sloshing, thirsting, bursting every way, going out a washing. I gets my 18 pence a day, with grub and gin, however, as much as I can put away to keep my strength together. Weak folks say it's all a sin, and at us get reviling, but there's nothing like a drop of gin to keep the copper boiling. You see why it needs to be said in a Cockney accent. Of course, once you'd washed the clothes and rinsed them and got almost all the smell of the black soap out of them, you had to dry them. It was one thing doing that in the country, where you could perhaps hang them out in the summer, but in the town, in the city, it was a very different matter. And in a city like London in particular, which was the atmosphere absolutely thick with smoke, with smuts from coal fires, how anybody got their clothes dry, and particularly if they were white, how they kept them clean once they were laundered, I have absolutely no idea. In time, the local authorities in London and elsewhere, other cities, started to take pity on washerwomen and laundresses and housewives, and they started to make dedicated facilities available to improve the laundry experience. This is a public baths in central London. It was a public bath where you could go and have a bath. This is the 19th century. Some of the medical doubts about baths have been overturned by greater knowledge, but importantly, it was also somewhere you could go and do the laundry, and it probably looked much like this photograph of a 20th century Glasgow steamy, where everybody would go and exchange gossip. As the 19th century wore on, the process became mechanised, at which point, of course, the men got interested. This is an early steam-driven laundry machine from the 1860s, and communal laundries also began to appear in the new social housing. This is a photograph of the communal laundry in the I've forgotten its name, in Shoreditch, the very first council estate built in, estate of council housing built in, say again? Arnold Circus. It's the Boundary Estate. Sorry, I couldn't remember that. This was the public laundry in the Boundary Estate, and council estates were still being built right through into the 20th century with communal laundries, until, of course, the laundrette arrived and took all the fun out of it. If you want to know a bit more about historic laundry, I'm not sure they'll let you have a go that yourself, but you could go to Audley End House near Saffron Walden, which is a big country house owned by English Heritage. And there they have an enormous laundry, because doing the laundry for the entire population of an enormous country house was quite a job. So here you have a whole row of sinks with washboards and so on and so forth, full of basins. Here you have dollies and possers or dollies waiting to be used. Here you have in the corner a pump from which water would come. And here you have in the corner two enormous coppers for heating the water. They were coal-fired, so the water would go in the top. There would be a coal fire underneath. You heated the water in the coppers, but of course, to get it into the sinks, the basins where you're actually doing the washing, of course, you had to dip a bucket or something in and haul it all about. There was an awful lot of carrying the stuff about. And they also have at Audley End a rather dinky little hand trolley, which says Audley End House Laundry, because they had not one but two laundries. What I've just been showing you was the wet laundry, which is where they actually did the washing. Round the corner was the dry laundry, which is where they did the drying. There was lots of stuff hanging up from the ceiling. There was a stove on which were heated the irons, which were used to press the wet, damp clothes. And in one corner is this. This is a mangle. Some of you may have seen mangles, hand-turned, two rollers. You put the wet clothes between the two rollers and the water gets squeezed out. That kind of mangle, that's a pissy little thing. This is a real mangle. Mangle comes from a Dutch word meaning a machine of war. And these were enormous great things. They were filled with stones. And what you did was you folded your wet sheets or whatever, you put them into the mangle, and then you rolled this great container full of stones over the top of them, doing two things, squeezing out the water, but also putting in a crease. They were the devil to work, and I'm going to finish with one more little poem. This should be sung to the tune of a popular mid-19th century marching song. I'm not going to attempt the tune. Cheer, boys, cheer, my mother bought a mangle. Cheer, boys, cheer, she filled it full of stones. Cheer, boys, cheer, she makes me turn the handle. Cheer, boys, cheer, it nearly breaks my bones. Thank you very much.
Excellent talk. Thank you very much, Nick. Do we have any questions?
Any questions? Anybody like to ask? Take me up, pick me up, take issue? Yes, down here.
What's something that fascinated you most, that you found most surprising when you were writing your history of London?
What was the most, or something that I found most surprising when I was writing my history of London's water?
Surely you have to buy the book to find out.
Okay, I'll give one thing away. The history of London's water comes right up to the present day. And in the final chapter, there is one statistic which really quite horrified me. London's water companies were private up until 1904, when they were taken into public ownership. In 1989, along with the rest of Britain's water companies, London's water was once more privatised. In the years since 1989, the aggregate of British water companies, privatised water companies, have borrowed £53 billion. They were privatised with no borrowings. They had no debts at all. During that time, since 1989, they borrowed £53 billion. You would think, wouldn't you, that that money was going to be invested in improving our pipes and our sewage works and all that sort of thing. And some of it was. But they also paid themselves in that time £56 billion in dividends. And the state of our water industry is an absolute scandal. I'm seeing the chairman of Thames Water tomorrow morning, and I'm really trying to work out what we're going to talk about. The important thing is to keep it polite. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
How do you think the sort of connection between all of this work that's
being done by women and poorly paid women, if paid at all, connects to these kinds of questions about what we value in economic terms and economic growth that we were hearing about from the previous speaker. You know, it seems like this is probably a kind of part of the economy was almost never considered in any kind of measure.
The question, which is a very good one, but then it comes from my daughter, is how does all this largely unpaid work done by women connect with the sort of things that Louise was talking about? And the answer is, of course, it's a very good. I mean, let's be clear. A lot of washerwomen in the 18th, 19th centuries, they were economic agents, they were economically active, they were selling their labour, so they would be picked up by GDP. And indeed, if you were unfortunate enough in Victorian times to die in an industrial accident, but fortunate enough to work for a caring employer, your employer might buy your widow a mangle so that she could set up in business as a washerwoman and have some way to earn a living when you were gone. The answer, of course, is that an awful lot of this went under the radar, was not counted, and women were a kind of resource which was exploited. Possibly they still are, but I mean the exploitation was more complete and more naked, and laundry is a very good example of it. So there was another question. Yes.
What inspired you to write the book?
What inspired me to write the book? I live in North London, in Stoke Newington, close to the former course of something called the New River, which is not new and which is not a river. It's an aqueduct which was originally dug to bring fresh water from Hertfordshire to the City of London. It's not new because it was constructed in 1613. Remarkably, it's still a fully functioning part of London's water supply. 10% of London's drinking water comes down the New River every day, and it stops just north of where I live, but it used to run past my house down to Islington, and you can find traces of it in the landscape and the streetscape. And I got intrigued. I thought, what is this thing? What is this New River? And I ended up getting sucked down this vast rabbit hole, and that's the result 4 or 5 years later. Yes?
Will there be another book about laundry this time?
I've tackled laundry in this book. What I've given you is a sort of précis of some of the material in the book. It's interesting, people have a limited tolerance, I've discovered, for books about water. My publisher said he loved this book. He said, very good, really, really good, and splendid stuff. He said, are you working on another one? I said, yes, I am actually, yes. I was thinking of writing a book about all those global cities which have interesting water histories and which are now running out of water. Cape Town in South Africa, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Arizona, Mumbai, Istanbul, they're all facing kind of water crises of greater or lesser magnitude. It's a real problem. And I was explaining this, I thought, quite enthusiastically, and I could see his eyes glaze over. So I'm not going to write a book about laundry now. I'm writing a book about spies instead. He got quite excited by that. Yeah.
I've got 2 questions and 1 anecdote, so bear with me. 2 questions, quite easy. First one, at the Elizabethan time, when Queen Elizabeth I was in power, how clean was the water?
How clean was the water in Elizabethan times? It depended where you got it from. There was a company which set up in the 1580s, which had water wheels under the arches of London Bridge and pumped water up from the Thames and distributed it in pipes into the City of London to paying customers. The London Bridge Waterworks, it was called. And actually, in the 1580s, the water probably wasn't too bad. That company survived right through until 1831, when Old London Bridge was demolished. And shortly before that, there was a public inquiry, one of many, into the state of London's water. And the superintendent of the London Bridge Waterworks was asked about the quality of his water. And he said, it's very good quality, very good. People like it. They prefer it to New River water because it's softer and so better for doing the laundry, which, of course, it was. But his questioner said, yeah, but what about drinking it? And he said, I wouldn't dream of drinking it. And the truth was that by the 19th century, the Thames had become unspeakably polluted. Some clever individual had invented the flushing water closet, and all that sewage was going straight into the Thames. So it was a huge, great cesspit. It was revolting. In Elizabethan times, it was cleaner, and people also got water from wells in their backyards, which were also quite clean, unless they were polluted by being too close to the household cesspit, and they could get water from a medieval system of conduits that brought small amounts of water, just a trickle, into the centre of the city to conduit houses from streams on the outside. But the quality of London's water by the 19th century was atrocious. You had a second question.
Well, you answered it. It was like, until when could we drink the water?
Okay, there was an Act of Parliament in 1852 which told all the water companies taking water out of the tidal part of the Thames and the lower part of the River Lee that they had to move their intakes up into the non-tidal part. And the non-tidal rivers were reasonably clean. The tidal Thames was full of all this sewage, and because it was tidal, the stuff would go downriver on the outgoing tide and then just come back up on the next tide, so it never went away. And that Act of Parliament, 1852 Act of Parliament, also required all water companies to filter their water. So from 1852 onwards, the 1850s onwards, the quality of water in London improved what is the word? I mean, extraordinarily. I mean, it became much, much better. Still not great by modern standards. And the last cholera outbreak in London was 1866, but it was much, much cleaner. You had an anecdote. But you see, now the problem here is I have to repeat your anecdote because I'm the one who's got the microphone.
No, it's just because knowledge is going both ways.
Being French?
There's a thing that it's not very renowned, but pupils used to drink wine at the canteen instead of water until the 1950s.
People used to drink wine instead of water at the canteen. And the same thing happened in this country. People drank beer, not water, because the water was unclean and tasted revolting. And the process of brewing, actually, they didn't realise this, but the process of brewing actually got rid of a lot of the unpleasant bacteria. And the other thing, of course, that they did was they boiled the water to make tea. Beer is nicer. It's also, as it happens, more nutritious. Cheers.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions?
No, stunned. They all want to go home.
Yes,
there is one here.
So why is linen clothing like better at absorbing smells and stuff?
Why is linen underclothing good at absorbing smell and stuff? And the honest answer to that is I don't know. Nobody's asked me that. I've taken it on trust. Linen is made from flax, so it's a natural product. It's a bit like sort of cotton or something like that. Well, no, it's not like cotton. That's not. And presumably, I'm assuming here that it is exceptionally absorbent. And the thing is, when you sweat, that's how your body odours are generated. So if you have something that is absorbent, I'm completely making this up, but it's all right. I spent 30 years as a BBC correspondent. You learn to do this sort of thing. I'm pretty sure that it was particularly absorbent and so particularly suited to this situation.
Any more questions? No?
Nope.
Oh.
Yes.
When you think about the labour-saving devices that have been brought into laundry over the years, which one invention reduced labour the most?
The modern washing machine. I mean, there is essentially, there are costs to that. There are environmental costs, there are financial costs, but essentially there is no labour cost. You know, I do my laundry once a week, I shove it in, it goes round, I take it out. Job done. Okay, I'll let you into a secret. My wife irons it. But that's the thing that absolutely transformed doing the laundry.
Oh, one last one, make it good.
How clean does the beef and ash combo actually get the laundry?
How clean does the beef and ash combo get the laundry? I don't know. I haven't tried it. Maybe I should, actually. The person who can tell you is a wonderful social historian called Ruth Goodman, and I relied a lot on Ruth Goodman. She's written a series of books, most of them tied to television series she's done down the years. And what she does is for the television program, for the book, she lives the life. So she spends 3 months or 6 months living as, a Victorian farmer's wife or an Elizabethan farm wife, and she finds these things out by doing. And her books are absolutely fascinating. I mean, I highly recommend them. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.